Hey there, welcome to today's episode. Something that I discovered kind of by accident, and it's the ability to use Koala Sampler as a bit of a crude kind of looper. I say crude because it's not perfect, there's a couple of things that you need to take into consideration, but it's a fun way of using Koala Sampler with some other applications to bring samples in nice and easy, kind of in real time, and be able to kind of layer those without the need for something like ORM. So let me show you how this works. We've got Koala Sampler laid out. I'm using this landscape view rather than the kind of vertical view, so a horizontal view. The reason for that is because the other applications that I'll be jumping back and forth between use the same horizontal layout. So rather than twisting the iPad, which makes no sense, it's good to just set off like this. Also going to go into settings. I've got an audio tab, and inside of there, I want to make sure background audio is set to on and enabled. If you're unfamiliar with that, it basically just means that any audio playing from Koala Sampler, in this case I've got some drums we're going to be using, but anything that is playing inside a Koala Sampler can be playing, and if I switch to another application, that audio can still be heard. We've got our drums laid out. You want to just use a metronome, you could just use a blank sequence, turn the metronome on. You can bounce to the other application, you'll still hear that. You can set your tempo to whatever you like. I'm using a hip hop drum loop, 82 BPM. If we take a look at the sequence, you'll notice it's looped up over the 2 bars. The first thing is that you don't need to be limited to 2 bars. You can do this for giant loops if you like. I haven't found any great limitation for how long you can record here so far. Underneath though, you'll notice I've also put in a bunch of MIDI notes for the 2 bars for a bunch of blank pads that don't have any samples. The number up to pad 9 is just completely random. Could be 10, 11, 12, whatever. I just wanted to throw a few in so that you've got them here so you can see them. And they represent the layers of audio that I want to bring into Koala Sampler. You can bring in extras at any time you like, but having them inputted into the steps will make sense as we go through. It's just a very quick pre-step that you can do to get this thing set up. When we go to the applications, there are a couple that I know that work. This Saga synth, because it has a record button and a tempo option. This is like a chiptune synth from AudioKit. It's pretty cool. However, this King of Digital is also from AudioKit. This one is really impressive. I'm not affiliated with AudioKit. I get nothing for saying this. I bought this with my own money. It's currently on sale for £5 UK. It's kind of always on sale, I think, but that's what it is. £5 gets you 900 synth presets. Plus all of these pages for doing sound design and sequencing. Hell of a lot going on. Even just as a standalone application, this is well worth, I think, the £5 to buy. Anyway, it has a record button and it has tempo here. There would be other applications, I'm sure, that you can use this same workflow, but these are the 2 that I own that I know that work, so we're going to be using these. When I press the record button, it says play note to start recording. That is important because it means there's no dead space when we start bringing this over as a loop. Now, there's one thing to bear in mind. I'm going to be recording to the drums that we got going on, and this thing starts recording at the first note. So if you're playing a loop and you've got whatever, our 2-bar loop that's playing around, and for whatever reason your melody starts a little bit into that loop, when it comes into Koala, you will have to shift the start point of that. But if you're recording like full loops starting at the beginning of the 2 bars and ending at the 2 bars, it's a good way of putting things in. And actually, because the way it snaps to the grid, it's not really a problem to shift things around. You just have to be aware that that's a limitation, if you like. The other thing that's important here is the tempo. The reason for that being, if you want to sequence, you can inside of this application, so of course the tempo is important there. But really, what I'm talking about is just bringing in any kind of sound. If I turn the delay off for a second, let's see, we've got like a bass sound, I think. Pretty cool. Sounds like something from Terminator. But if I put on a delay and we start to apply some of that delay, that is being synced to 120 inside of this application. But what we can do, of course, is we can come in and change that to 82 to match our Koala project, just so that if it's important to you and having the time delay be correct as it's being recorded, then you have the option to do that. So we could set this at, I don't know, 1/8 notes. You can hear a little bit of that delay, we could up the mix a bit. I don't really care what we record either for this particular episode, it's just showing you how it works, not the kind of beat that I'm creating. So what we can do is we can go back. Unfortunately, it requires me talking over the top of the beat now so that I can show you this in real time. But we just want to set our track off to record, our sequence. I can then skip back over to the synth, and we can still hear that playing. So even just something as simple as that, maybe that's how we want to start. So we'll arm it to record, just wait for the loop to come around. Maybe you'll leave it a little bit longer than what you've got, so 2 bars is what we know we've got there. I wasn't really counting in my head, but of course you want to record to roughly that amount. I would usually leave a little bit extra. When I press the record button, tells me where do I want to send that, and I want to send it directly to Koala Sampler. So you see how that works. We are using it like a looper because, of course, we can just keep coming in and recording. That was a pretty naff take, but if that was good and something that we liked, we can keep building upon that, and we can just keep adding layers that keep their independence as well. It's not like some loopers where it's just recording all that audio, and so then at the end you don't have any options about how much volume or effects you want to apply. We're getting individual separate sounds as we record through. It's very simple, but I think it's also quite effective. You can come back in and you can change things as well. We know that's on pad 2, so let's say I only want that to play for a certain amount of time. I can drag this thing over and maybe just put it here so it's only playing for 1 bar. We're still inside of Koala Sampler, so if there's any editing that needs to be done, we can play around with the sample. Let's say the volume's a little off. Maybe there's a little unwanted click or pop or something. You could apply a little attack, something like that. But let's say that's what we wanted. We'll do it just one more time so that you can see what I'm doing again, but we can keep this playing. Let's say we open up the synth again, and I'll just randomly try and choose something. It's like an effect noise. Something like that will work. Again, just leaving a little bit of tail there. We can send that over to Koala as it loops around. Now, the timing that I recorded, like I was talking about earlier, was slightly different to that. That is the timing of where the MIDI note is. It actually works out all right because we're still playing around to the same tempo, so I could kind of leave it there, but if I wanted it like I had it originally, the timing of it was probably shifting that note over a little bit, so the start point was over a touch. Just keep that in mind when you're working with it. That is really the essence of what I've been trying to show you guys. But we can still take that a step further. If you've got something like the SP404 Mark II, I could then take this, and let's say we don't want the drum samples in here. I could get rid of those, and I can just have this looping around. And let's say I want to apply some effects to that. I could maybe apply like a vinyl sim, turn that on. Put some of that wobbly effect in, whatever it is. I could then use skip back, and whatever it is I've recorded, whatever that loop is, as long as I've recorded like a full loop, I could come in, dial that in, and send it back into Koala Sampler. So there's so much creative scope for using in this way. You just have a couple of applications you can bounce back and forth and do something really fun and creative with it. One other thing that I would suggest, if you're kind of like me, when I'm working with synths and stuff like that, I would generally plug my little MIDI keyboard in for greater control, because then we can have velocity variation. It's just a little bit more fun to kind of play around with as it's looping. For real estate, and just to not make this video very cluttered and have a lot of stuff on screen, I opted to just do this with the iPad screen, which is fine, but a MIDI controller would make this a much more pleasurable experience. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've learned something. I'm going to leave it there so we don't make the video any longer than it needs to be. I will catch you guys in the next episode. Take care.